now looking at the while, do while, and for loops. They're all clustered together as ideas around iteration or repeating things again and again and again. And given that I stuffed up the first take of this video, that seems somewhat apt. All right, so the first one is a while loop. A while loop will do a thing 0 or more times. It doesn't have to execute. So first thing that happens is it tests a condition. All right. Now, if that condition happens to be true, it will then do the looping action. All right. And it will keep doing that looping action until that condition becomes false. So in this example, the best one I can think of is a game's pause screen, right? Because you can keep playing the game until you hit pause. You hit escape, pause, whatever the button is, and it will then move out of what they call the game loop into the thing. So while, and the shift 1 or the apostrophe here is the not. So while not finished, that's why I chose that thing, do a thing, right? So, actually, whoops, that's got to equal false. That makes more sense. While not finished, while finished equals false, or while not finished. So if the condition is true, in this case, I'm flipping it so it's actually false, but you get the idea. If you have any questions, comments, queries, etc., check out the comments and drop one in there. So console dot write line press quote press C to continue. All right, end of the line. There, done. So if console, and this is a new one from this out of this series. So we'll just spend a second on it. I want to read an individual key press, and from that key press, I want it to get the key that they press. Now I'm comparing this to a console key. In this case, the letter C. C to continue. All right. And be finished equals true. Now, just linking back to the previous video tutorial I did, because this is a single statement attached to the if, I don't need to put in the curly braces. I can do so, but I don't need to. And I'm just terminating with a semicolon. So this actually should be one statement, much like sort of this. But I do it this way just to make it a little easier to read. All right, I'm just going to put in a comment here, just end of the while loop, and correct random key presses. And this gives us the basic structure. I've set the initial condition. I'm only doing it. So if I hit F5 to test this in Visual Studio, hopefully it will hurry up and get there. There we are, C to continue. Press other keys and it goes, yeah, not so much. And then when I press C, it exits. So you can see here, it's basically just doing what we think. The one piece I'm actually really tempted to add, just to make it look neater, is get it to clear out the screen once we're done. All right, so that's the first thing. All right, the second one is a do while loop. So while the while loop needs to run 0 or more times, the do while loop is guaranteed to run once. So switching over to the next Wikipedia reference, you can see here, it runs through the sequence, does whatever it is, and then does a test condition. These are also known as repeat untils. So repeat whatever until you are done. But in C#, it is simply a do while. So I'm going to complete the structure while test condition and leave that at that. So in this case, what am I going to be testing? Well, I'm going to set up a little counter and make that equal to 0. And I'm going to count how many times they press a key before we exit. So again, console.clear, I'm just going to grab that because it's guaranteed to run once. I'm just going to drop that in there. Then the counter is increased. Now, this is actually a little bit of shorthand here. Counter equals counter plus 1. So if you remember from one of the earlier videos I've done, variable equals variable plus 1. In this case, it's just shorthand. The plus plus means add 1 to it. You can do plus plus variable name. You can also do minus minus for take away 1. Where that sort of sits, I will actually discuss in class. I don't see the need to discuss it here. But if you have any questions, again, comments about console. So the next bit is the informational statement for the user. I'm just going to copy that from there, delete that little extra dot, press Q to quit. All right, now we need to actually get into what we're going to be testing here. And it's basically the same as this. I will read a key press. In this case, I want it to be equal to Q. Now, if I delete this and hit dot, I get a whole list of possible key presses. It's a fairly extensive list, and I would suggest reading through the Microsoft documentation to find out what that all means. So, test the condition, and we are done. The last little bit is I'm just going to cut and paste this and do a little bit of extra cheating. Get rid of that. Clear the counter one more time. Clear the screen one more time, and then just output the counter result. So that's just a bit of tidy up at the end. Again, going through and testing this with an F5 press. I'm going to have press C to continue. Yep, there it is. Press C, it disappears. Press a bunch of other keys, and this is the mistake I made last time I ran through this. So I pressed any key, and it didn't equal Q, so it exits the loop. I need to make that not equal to Q, so if I press anything other than Q, it will exit. Actually, I'll leave that as it is so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. F5. So C, and then I just tap Q, 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 press something else, and I hit Q 15 times in that whole spamming session. So if I press not equal to Q, it should run through and do that, and then finally it outputs the result. So that's the second form of looping that exists. The final sort of looping, and this is actually the one that I originally learnt first. I think the above two forms are a little clearer, but this you're dropping a couple of things at once. So with the for loop, let's have a look at this. Basically, we set up an initial condition, what we usually call a loop variable. We do a test condition. If it's true, we then do whatever should happen inside the loop, or the D, which is that there. And then we modify something, and we go back and forth. So it's probably easiest or clearer if I actually just write out the code. So for, I set up an integer, loop 1 equals 0. All right, that's my initial condition. I'm setting a variable called loop1, which only exists inside this loop, to the value of 0. Now, when do I want it to work? Well, I want it to be less than 5. All right, so if loop 1 is less than 5, it's going to keep looping. And then, lowercase first, loop 1 plus plus. And this is one of the reasons I introduced the plus plus to you, because while, because it's useful for for loops, especially for loops, because that's the standard structure that comes in there, because it's a nice little piece of shorthand. So in this case, this one actually looks really, really simple, but there's a lot going on. So that's basically it. So here I set up my initial condition before the semicolon, and this is where the loop starts. I then have a test condition, and while that is true, it will keep looping. And finally, I modify that test condition. So if I press F5, and then go C, and then we'll just test this, Q, 6, great. I get a line of 5 stars. You can see that there. So when doing any sort of looping, there's a thing known as an infinite loop. And this is just something to watch out for, that you've got to make sure that your loop will exit. And so part of the testing for this would be going through each iteration, especially for simpler loops. It's a lot easier. But the more complicated loops, this becomes a problem, because if I actually leave this out, and I'll run it again and then just skim through it. It's going to keep printing stars forever simply because I didn't give it an exit condition. I didn't tell it to, no, not an exit condition. I didn't tell it to change the loop there. So it needs this to be able to modify through this sequence, and you've got to watch out for infinite loops. One of the classic examples of an infinite loop is really quite simple. And that's it. For, do nothing. Nothing is defined. You can also do the same with a while or do while. So, do, colon, then while, true. And that's never going to come up false, so it's always going to do it. So you have to be aware of infinite looping. All right, so the final little trick I want to show you, and I need to actually put in some comments here, end of loop 1, is nested loops, because you can nest all this stuff inside one another, which is actually not too difficult to do and gives you some interesting results. I'm just going to rename this too, because I'm declaring and naming the same variable. I run into this slight problem of within the scope. So the first I loop exists from this point down to here. The second one, which was called I loop 1, then existed here, and you can't have two variables with the same name. It's too many things, because programming languages, it's fairly stupid, doesn't know what to look for, doesn't know what to do, so it could be either, it can't tell. So this one actually gets kind of interesting. I'm just going to trim off the end of that, and I'm going to push that to 10. If I press F5, I'll run through this quickly. CQ, I have 10 stars in a line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, brilliant, and 5 lines of stars. So here you can see this structure of one loop inside another one to create more complicated graphics. A lot of the early programs would have whole strings that would then assemble, throw up and place on the screen and such. This is enough information to handle the challenge exercises in the booklet I've provided, and you should be fine from there on in. Good luck with it, and any questions, queries, comments, please comment on the video.